Weston's heart pounded as he stepped into the Gilded Fork, the upscale Manhattan restaurant glowing with crystal chandeliers and smug exclusivity. He dreamed of this night, his first date with Elias, the man whose laugh felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, but the whispers started before they even sat down. By the time the waiter sneered, "We don't serve your kind here," Weston's dream had shattered into a public spectacle of shame. The restaurant's polished floors gleamed under the soft light, reflecting the disdainful glares of patrons in tailored suits and glittering dresses. Weston, 26, with his sharp jawline and emerald eyes, had spent years building a life where he could walk tall as an openly gay man. Tonight, though, in this bastion of New York's elite, he felt like a kid again, shrinking under the weight of judgment. Elias, 25, with his warm brown skin and easy charisma, squeezed Weston's hand under the table, his voice steady but low. "We don't have to stay," he murmured, his almond eyes searching Weston's for a signal. But Weston's pride burned hotter than his humiliation. He'd worked too hard, clawed his way up from a small-town trailer park to a corner office in tech, to let this slide. The manager, a wiry man named Victor with a slick-back ponytail, approached their table, his smile as fake as the leather on his knockoff loafers. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid there's been a mix-up with your reservation," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." The subtext was clear: "Get out. You don't belong." The couple at the next table snickered, and a woman in a red dress muttered something about standards. Weston's face flushed, but he kept his voice calm. "Cutting. Our money spends as well as theirs." "Check again." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "No need. Please leave, or I'll have security escort you." Elias stood, his chair scraping loudly, drawing more eyes. "Weston, let's go. This place isn't worth it." But Weston's gaze locked on Victor, his mind racing. He'd faced this before, small-minded people wielding their tiny power like a club, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for Elias, for every person who'd ever been made to feel less than. He rose slowly, his 6'1" frame towering over Victor. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made the manager flinch. Outside, the autumn air bit at their skin as they stood on the sidewalk, the city's pulse humming around them. Elias pulled Weston into a hug, his arms strong and grounding. "I'm sorry," Elias whispered. "I wanted tonight to be perfect." Weston's throat tightened, but he managed a small smile. "It still can be. Just not here." They walked away, hand in hand, but Weston's mind was already turning. He learned long ago that revenge wasn't just about getting even, it was about rewriting the story. Back in his sleek Tribeca apartment, Weston poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Elias as they sank onto the couch. The city skyline sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of how far he'd come. He built a tech startup from nothing, sold it for millions at 24, and now consulted for Fortune 500 companies. But money couldn't erase the sting of tonight. "I know that look," Elias said, his voice teasing but concerned. "What's cooking in that brilliant head of yours?" Weston's lips curled into a determined smile. "They think they can push us out? I'm going to buy that damn restaurant." Elias laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Weston's eyes were deadly serious. He'd spent years analyzing businesses, spotting weaknesses, turning failing ventures into gold. The Gilded Fork was owned by a failing hospitality group, hemorrhaging cash despite its pretentious facade. Weston had seen the financials months ago during a consulting gig. He knew their vulnerabilities. "You're insane," Elias said, but his grin betrayed his excitement. "And what if you pull it off?" Weston leaned in, their foreheads touching. "Then we walk back in there, and they'll serve us with a smile." By morning, Weston was on the phone with his financial advisor, pulling strings and crunching numbers. The hospitality group was desperate for a bailout, and Weston had the capital and the motive. He worked through the day, his laptop a battlefield, emails flying to lawyers and investors. Elias watched, half amused, half awestruck, as Weston's intensity filled the room. "You're really doing this," Elias said, shaking his head. Weston looked up, his green eyes blazing. "They don't get to humiliate us and walk away. Not this time." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of calculated chaos. Weston's Tribeca apartment transformed into a war room, papers strewn across the glass coffee table, his laptop glowing with spreadsheets and contracts. Elias, sprawled on the couch with a coffee mug, watched Weston negotiate with the precision of a general. "You're terrifying when you're like this," Elias teased, his voice warm with admiration. Weston shot him a playful smirk but didn't break focus. He was closing in on the deal of a lifetime. The hospitality group, Pinnacle Dining, was on its last legs, and the Gilded Fork was their crown jewel, or so they thought. Weston's research revealed a house of cards, unpaid vendors, inflated overhead, and a management team more interested in egos than efficiency. By noon, he'd secured a meeting with Pinnacle's CEO, a harried woman named Claudia Voss, who was drowning in debt and desperate for a lifeline. Weston didn't just want to buy the restaurant. He wanted to make them beg him to take it. The meeting took place in a sterile midtown conference room, the kind that reeked of corporate desperation. Claudia, in her late 40s with sharp features and a tense smile, sat across from Weston, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Carter," she began, "your offer is unexpected." Weston leaned back, his tailored blazer accentuating his broad shoulders, exuding calm control. "It's generous, considering Pinnacle's financials," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're 3 months from bankruptcy. I'm offering you a way out." Claudia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. Weston's offer was a cash infusion to save Pinnacle's other properties, in exchange for full ownership of the Gilded Fork. The lawyers exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for someone so young to wield this much power. "Why this restaurant?" Claudia asked, suspicion lacing her voice. Weston's smile was razor sharp. "Let's just say I have a personal interest." Back at the apartment, Elias was pacing, his usual calm replaced by nervous energy. "What if they say no?" he asked, running a hand through his dark curls. Weston pulled him close, their lips brushing in a fleeting, grounding kiss. "They won't," he said. "They can't afford to." Elias searched his face, then nodded. "You're not just doing this for us, are you?" Weston's silence was answer enough. This was bigger than one night, bigger than one restaurant. It was about every door slammed in their faces, every whisper behind their backs. By evening, the deal was done. Weston signed the papers, his signature bold and unyielding. The gilded fork was his, effective immediately. Elias stared at the contract, then at Weston, his eyes wide. "You actually did it," he said, half laughing. Weston's grin was triumphant, but tinged with something darker. Now comes the fun part. They returned to the Gilded Fork that night, the same place that had spat them out less than a day ago. The chandeliers still sparkled. The patrons still preened. But Weston walked in with a different kind of power. Victor, the manager, spotted them immediately, his face twisting into a scowl. "I thought I told you," he started, but Weston cut him off, holding up a single sheet of paper, the ownership deed. "You work for me now," Weston said, his voice low and lethal. The restaurant went quiet, forks pausing midair, eyes turning to the scene. Victor laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "This is a joke, right?" Weston stepped closer, his presence commanding the room. "Call Claudia Voss. She'll confirm it." Victor's face paled as he fumbled for his phone, his bravado crumbling. Elias stood beside Weston, his hand brushing against Weston's, a silent anchor. The patrons watched, some curious, some uncomfortable, as Victor's call confirmed the impossible. The man they'd humiliated was now their boss. Weston didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He turned to Elias, his voice softening. "Dinner." Elias's smile was radiant, a beacon in the storm. "Only if you're paying, Mr. Owner." They took their seats at the best table, the one Victor had claimed was reserved the night before. The staff scrambled, unsure how to act, their unease palpable. Weston leaned across the table, his hand finding Elias's. "This is just the beginning," he said, his eyes burning with purpose. The Gilded Fork buzzed with tension as Weston and Elias savored their meal, every bite a quiet act of defiance. The staff moved like ghosts, their usual arrogance replaced by uncertainty, their glances darting to the man who now held their livelihoods in his hands. Weston's plan wasn't just about ownership, it was about transformation, and he was only getting started. By the next morning, Weston was back at the restaurant, this time in a sharp gray suit, his laptop open on the manager's desk. Victor hovered nearby, his ponytail less slick, his confidence eroded. "Mr. Carter," he stammered. "We didn't know, last night was a misunderstanding." Weston didn't look up from his screen. "A misunderstanding doesn't include slurs or kicking out paying customers," he said, his tone ice cold. "You're on probation. One more misstep, and you're gone." Weston's vision for the Gilded Fork was bold, a place where everyone, regardless of who they loved, could walk in and feel like they belonged. He spent the day meeting with the staff, laying out new policies. No discrimination, no elitism, no exceptions. Some employees nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. But Weston's authority was undeniable. He wasn't just their boss. He was a force, his presence filling the room like a storm about to break. Elias joined him in the afternoon, bringing coffee and a knowing smile. "You're scaring them," he said, leaning against the desk. Weston chuckled, but his eyes were tired. "Good. They need to understand what's at stake." Elias's hand brushed his, a reminder of why this mattered. "You're not just changing a restaurant, Wes. You're changing lives." Weston's throat tightened. Elias always saw the bigger picture, the heart behind his ambition. The real challenge came that evening when a group of regulars, wealthy, connected, and fiercely loyal to the old Gilded Fork, arrived. Led by a silver-haired man named Richard Hale, a Wall Street tycoon with a reputation for getting his way. They demanded to know why standards were slipping. "We heard about last night," Richard said, his voice dripping with entitlement. "This place has a reputation to uphold." Weston stood, his height and quiet intensity making Richard pause. "The only reputation this place will have is one of inclusion," Weston said. "If that doesn't suit you, there's the door." Richard's face reddened, but he didn't leave. Instead, he and his group stayed, their presence a test. Weston felt the weight of their stares as he moved through the dining room, checking on guests, ensuring the staff followed his new rules. Elias, ever the peacemaker, worked the room with his charm, disarming tense patrons with a smile and a story. By the end of the night, even Richard's group seemed less hostile, though Weston knew the battle wasn't over. Later, in the quiet of the restaurant's back office, Weston slumped into a chair, exhaustion creeping in. Elias knelt beside him, his hands warm on Weston's knees. "You're doing something incredible," Elias said, his voice soft but fierce. "But you don't have to carry it all alone." Weston pulled him close, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise. "I'm not alone," Weston whispered. "I've got you." The next day brought new challenges. Social media was ablaze with rumors about the Gilded Fork's new owner, some praising Weston's stand, others calling it a publicity stunt. A local news outlet reached out for an interview, and Weston agreed, seeing a chance to set the narrative. Sitting across from a reporter in a bustling coffee shop, he spoke with raw honesty about the humiliation he and Elias faced, about his vision for a restaurant that welcomed everyone. The reporter, a young woman named Lila, listened intently, her eyes softening as Weston described the pain of being ostracized and the power of fighting back. The interview went viral, amplifying Weston's message but also drawing backlash. By evening, the Gilded Fork's inbox was flooded with hate mail, accusing Weston of ruining a New York institution. But for every hateful message, there were 10 more from people who'd felt invisible, thanking him for giving them hope. Weston read each one, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just his fight anymore, it was theirs. The Gilded Fork's dining room hummed with a new energy as Weston's changes took root. The staff, though still adjusting, began to see the vision, a place where every guest was treated with respect. No exceptions. But the city's old guard wasn't ready to let go. Richard Hale and his cronies returned, their presence a calculated challenge, their whispers loud enough to carry. "This place used to have class," one of them muttered, eyeing a diverse group of diners laughing nearby. Weston overheard, his jaw tightening, but he kept his cool. He learned long ago that power wasn't in the loudest voice, it was in the long game. He spent the morning training the staff, emphasizing empathy over elitism. Some, like a young server named Mia, embraced the shift, her warm smile welcoming a queer couple who'd hesitated at the door. Others, like Victor, dragged their feet, their resentment simmering. Weston kept Victor close, not out of trust, but strategy. Better to watch your enemies than let them plot in the shadows. "You're either with me or out," Weston told him during a tense one-on-one. Victor nodded, but his eyes said he wasn't convinced. Elias was Weston's anchor, slipping into the restaurant between his shifts as a graphic designer to help with branding. He redesigned the menus, adding vibrant colors and a tagline, "A table for everyone." "You're making this place yours," Elias said, his hands steady as he adjusted a logo on his tablet. Weston watched him, marveling at how Elias's calm balanced his fire. "Ours," Weston corrected, his voice soft. Elias's smile was a spark, lighting up the chaos of the day. The real test came when a local LGBTQ plus advocacy group reached out, inspired by the viral interview. They wanted to host a fundraiser at the Gilded Fork, a bold move for a venue once known for its exclusivity. Weston saw it as a chance to cement his vision, but the staff was nervous, and Richard Hale's group was already spreading rumors about lowering standards. Weston called a staff meeting, his voice steady but fierce. "This event isn't just a fundraiser, it's a statement. We're not just serving food, we're serving change." "Who's in?" Mia raised her hand first, followed by others. Victor stayed silent, his arms crossed. The fundraiser was a whirlwind of color and energy. Drag queens in glittering gowns mingled with activists in jeans and tees, the dining room alive with laughter and music. Weston and Elias worked side by side, greeting guests, their hands brushing in quiet moments of connection. A young trans woman approached Weston, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd feel safe in a place like this," she said. Weston's heart swelled, but before he could respond, a crash echoed from the kitchen. Victor had accidentally dropped a tray of glasses, his smirk barely hidden. Weston pulled him aside, his voice low. "One more stunt, and you're done." Victor's eyes flashed with defiance, but he nodded. The night continued, a success by every measure, with donations pouring in and the community buzzing. But Weston knew Victor was a problem, one he'd have to deal with soon. Later, as the last guest left, Weston and Elias stood on the rooftop garden, the city sprawling below. Elias leaned against him, his head on Weston's shoulder. "You did it," Elias said. "You made this place ours." Weston's arms tightened around him. "Not yet," he said. "But we're close." The stars above felt like witnesses to their quiet vow to keep fighting together. The next morning, Weston found an anonymous note slipped under the office door. "You don't belong here. Leave." His blood ran cold, but he didn't show it to Elias. Instead, he called a private investigator he'd worked with before, a gruff man named Tony who specialized in corporate espionage. "Find out who's behind this," Weston said. Tony nodded, already on a case. Weston wasn't just fighting for a restaurant anymore. He was fighting for a legacy. The anonymous note burned a hole in Weston's pocket, but he kept his focus razor-sharp. The Gilded Fork was thriving, its tables filled with a diverse crowd that reflected the city's heartbeat. Young, old, queer, straight, all drawn by the promise of a place where they belonged. But the undercurrent of resistance grew stronger. Victor's subtle defiance, late shifts, snide comments had become a rallying point for a few disgruntled staff members. Weston knew he had to act, but he needed proof. Tony, the private investigator, worked fast. By midweek, he had a lead, security footage showing Victor slipping the note under the door, his face caught in a fleeting smirk. Weston confronted him in the office. The footage paused on his laptop. "Care to explain?" Weston asked, his voice calm but deadly. Victor's bravado crumbled, his excuses stumbling over each other. It was a joke, he tried, but Weston cut him off. "You're fired. Pack your things." Victor's face twisted with rage, but he left without a fight. His departure sending a ripple through the staff. The news spread quickly, and the mood in the restaurant shifted. Mia and the others who'd embraced Weston's vision stepped up, their loyalty a quiet strength. But Richard Hale and his clique doubled down, their complaints now public on social media, accusing Weston of destroying tradition. The backlash stung, but Weston saw an opportunity. He invited a local blogger, Jamal, known for his sharp takes on culture and food, to review the Gilded Fork. Jamal arrived with a small entourage, his keen eyes taking in every detail. His review, published the next day, was glowing. The Gilded Fork isn't just a restaurant, it's a revolution. Weston Carter has turned a snobbish relic into a beacon of inclusion. The review brought a flood of new customers, but it also drew a protest. A small group, egged on by Richard's connections, gathered outside with signs, "Keep tradition alive." Weston watched from the window, his stomach churning. Elias, ever steady, took his hand. "They're loud, but they're losing," he said. Weston nodded, but the weight of the fight was heavy. He wasn't just battling bigots, he was battling history, and history fought dirty. That night, Weston and Elias hosted a community dinner, free for anyone who'd ever felt unwelcome. The dining room overflowed with stories, teens kicked out of their homes, couples shunned by families, all finding solace in the warmth of the Gilded Fork. A young man named Leo, barely 20, shared how he'd come out to his parents and lost everything. Weston listened, his heart aching with memories of his own small-town struggles. He stood, raising a glass. "This place is yours," he said, his voice thick. "We're building a home here. For all of us." The room erupted in cheers, Elias's hand squeezing his under the table. But the victory was short-lived. Tony called the next morning with news. Richard Hale was working with a rival hospitality group, trying to buy back the Gilded Fork through a hostile takeover. They found a loophole in the original sale, a technicality that could force Weston to sell. Panic clawed at him, but Elias's voice cut through. "You've faced worse," he said, his eyes fierce. "We'll fight this together." Weston nodded, his mind racing. He called his lawyers, his investors, anyone who could help. The battle was no longer just about a restaurant. It was about protecting everything they'd built. As the week ended, Weston stood in the rooftop garden, Elias beside him, the city's lights a glittering promise below. "What if we lose?" Weston asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elias turned, his hands cupping Weston's face. "We won't," he said, his kiss a vow. "Because we're not just fighting for us. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." Weston's eyes burned with tears, but he smiled. For the first time, he felt like he could win not just the restaurant, but the war. The threat of a hostile takeover loomed like a storm cloud, but Weston was no stranger to storms. He and Elias spent days strategizing, their apartment a fortress of legal documents and late-night coffee. Weston's lawyers found a counter to the loophole, a clause that protected the sale if the new owner could prove the business's value had increased under their leadership. The Gilded Fork's soaring revenue, thanks to its new inclusive ethos, was undeniable proof. But Richard Hale wasn't backing down, and the fight was about to get ugly. Weston rallied the community, leveraging the goodwill from the fundraiser and Jamal's review. He hosted an open forum at the restaurant, inviting patrons, staff, and activists to share what the Gilded Fork meant to them. The dining room overflowed, voices rising with stories of acceptance and belonging. Mia spoke of serving a lesbian couple who'd proposed at their table, tears in her eyes. Leo, the young man from the community dinner, talked about finding a safe space after years of rejection. Weston listened, his resolve steeling. This was why he fought, not for revenge, but for a future where no one felt less than. Richard and his group crashed the forum, their presence a deliberate provocation. This place was a landmark, Richard bellowed, his face red. You're turning it into a circus. The room tensed. But Weston stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. A landmark for who? For people like you, who think belonging is a privilege. This is a place for everyone now. The crowd erupted in applause, drowning out Richard's protests. For the first time, he looked small, his power slipping away. The legal battle came to a head in a sleek midtown courtroom. Weston, in a tailored black suit, stood beside his lawyer, his eyes locked on Elias in the gallery. The rival group's case was weak, built on bluster and outdated ideals. But Richard's influence cast a long shadow. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the financials and community testimonials. "Mr. Carter," she said, "you've turned a failing business into a thriving one in weeks." The sale stands. The gavel fell, and Elias's smile lit up the room. Weston exhaled, the weight lifting, but not entirely. Back at the Gilded Fork, Weston threw a celebration, the dining room alive with music, laughter, and pride flags. Patrons danced, staff mingled as equals, and the city's energy pulsed through the open windows. Elias pulled Weston onto the rooftop garden, the same place where they'd shared quiet moments amid the chaos. "You did it," Elias said, his arms wrapping around Weston's waist. "We did it," Weston corrected, his lips brushing Elias's forehead. The city sparkled below, a testament to their victory. But Weston wasn't done. He announced a new initiative, a scholarship fund for LGBTQ plus youth, funded by the Gilded Fork's profits. Leo was the first recipient, his tearful hug a reminder of why this mattered. The restaurant became more than a business. It was a beacon, a proof that love and resilience could rewrite even the ugliest stories. Richard and his ilk faded into irrelevance, their complaints drowned out by a community that refused to be silenced. Years later, Weston and Elias stood in the same rooftop garden, now married, their rings glinting in the moonlight. The Gilded Fork had become a national model for inclusion, its story told in articles and documentaries. Weston looked at Elias, his heart full. "I thought I was fighting for us," he said, his voice soft. "But we were fighting for something bigger." Elias kissed him, slow and deep, the city humming their anthem below. "We were fighting for home," he said. And in that moment, under the stars, they knew they'd found it.